Hello everyone and welcome to a wonderful game from day 4 of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals. It is Anish Giri with the white pieces versus Magnus Carlsen with black. All 3 games they played were absolutely incredible, and yes, I'm saying there were 3 of them and all 3 with very decisive results. And I could have shown you either of those 3. I decided to show you this one as it features everyone's favorite opening, the French defense. So let's dive straight into it. Anish has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to e4. And yes, going into day 4, Magnus and Duda are leading the tournament, both with perfect score. So e4, e6, Magnus goes for the French defense, d4, d5, and now knight to c3. We have knight to f6 and pawn to e5. The Steinitz variation, advancing the pawn, challenging the knight, knight f to d7, and now pawn to f4. We have c5, striking in the center. This is all very, very standard stuff. Knight f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to e3. Both of them playing the absolute top moves. A6 and now queen to d2. We have pawn to b5, and here the standard reply is d captures on c5 or pawn to a3. Anish goes for pawn to a3, and now queen to a5. Interestingly, queen to b6 is played quite a few more times than queen to a5, but last time it was played, it was in 2021. So the queen to b6, even though it's been played more, it's literally last year's move. So here, queen to a5, this is sort of the improved version. Bishop to e2, now going, maybe deciding to castle, and now Magnus goes for it. Pawn to b4. You cannot capture as the rook on a1 is hanging, so knight back to b1 or d1 are the options. Anish goes for knight to d1, and rook to b8 now. We have castles by Anish, and there is a game where b captures on a3 was played. It's a very nice game between Yuan Yi and the Ding Liren. It was played some 10 years ago. In a tournament somewhere, I believe in China, but here that ended in a draw. But here we have pawn to c4 by Magnus, which is still not a new game. Pawn to a4, and now here we have bishop to e7. There is one game where pawn to b3 was played, but Magnus goes bishop to e7, and it is now as of move 13 that we have a completely new game, and this is where our interest really begins. So here, queen to e1. Anish wants to shift the queen over to the king side to start an attack on Magnus's king. We have b3, Magnus offers a queen trade, and now c3. Anish prevents this by blocking the queen. If you trade, let's say captures, black is just better here. There's not all that much white has to show for. You're going to play c3, and then something like knight to b6, bishop to d7. You're going to capture the a4 pawn, and then you're just going to move your pieces, advance the a pawn, and it's going to be a better position for black. So Anish, of course, closes this c3. He wants the queen side closed, he wants the center closed, so he can attack on the king side. Knight to b6 by Magnus goes after the a4 pawn, or so you would think, and here Anish has to figure out how to go about this position. It's an incredibly tricky position that you can, I'm not going to ask you to pause the video and try to figure out what to play here, because it's an incredibly complicated position. This is basically where you decide what turn the game will take, and you could either make it a very good game for white, or you could make it a very bad game for white. So just enjoy the position, savor the position, if you will. It's just so complicated that I'm not even going to show you how to play this. I will show you after we actually check out the game, if some of you are interested in that, because it's such a disgusting engine line. So here Anish plays pawn to f5. He wants to open up lines in front of the black king, and it makes sense to give up a pawn to do that. So e captures on f5, and Magnus said in an interview after the game that he was kind of scared in this position, but after Anish played f5, he thought either I'm going to lose like really quickly in a couple of moves, or I'm completely fine. So e captures on f5, we have queen to g3, now going after the g7 pawn, and the g6, defending both g7, and now f5 is sufficiently defended. Bishop to g5, and now bishop to e6 by Magnus. We have bishop to f6 attacking the rook, and Magnus trades here. Bishop captures, pawn captures, and now knight to d7 as the rook on b8 is attacked, so you want to have it sufficiently defended. Knight to g5 now, and here we have rook to c8. Magnus doesn't like his rook on b8, so he shifts it over to c8, and now Anish should play queen to e3 to put pressure on the bishop here. but he decides to capture right away. Knight captures on e6, f captures, and queen to d6. Seems like it's the same idea. You're attacking e6, you're threatening f7, king captures, queen captures, knight on d7. However, there's that annoying move that always saves you whenever you have a bad position, and that of course is a move with the knight back. Magnus plays knight to f8, and this solves all of his problems. You don't have to worry about the e6 pawn, you don't have to worry about f7 check. There's really not all that much to worry about here. So Anish has to figure out how to continue, and it's just not easy to find a move because there are no moves here. So Anish wants to kind of open up the e-file. He plays bishop captures on c4 to free up the e-file for the rooks. D captures on c4, and now knight to e3, getting the knight into the attack. Queen to c7. Now Magnus offers a queen trade. Knight captures on c4. And now, of course, you cannot capture. Knight captures on d6 will make a very nice fork. So king to f7, and now pawn to d5. Again, you can't really go for this. It will still be a nice fork. The king and rook will get forked. So knight to d8 by Magnus. D captures on e6 with check. Knight f captures on e6, and now knight to e5 check. And Magnus has two options. King to e8 loses terribly. You do not want to go king to e8. If king to e8, then just f7 check and you resign. Your other option is to go king to g8, which is possible, but after rook 8 to d1, White will have some fighting chances. So after knight to e5 check, Magnus played the strongest move, and that is to boldly capture on f6. King captures on f6. And although the king is in a very weird spot, you don't really have a good way to continue the attack. If you go for something like knight g4 check, you just move the king back, king to g7, and you don't have a continuation here. Probably just trading, and that's pretty much it. You go for the endgame, and you're lost. So instead, knight to d7 check. We have king to f7. King to g7 allows Anish to grab a draw because there's this annoying perpetual here, queen to h4 with check now, or even better, after queen to e7 check, you can block with the knight. Now queen to f6 check. It doesn't matter how you play this. If king h6, queen h4 check, and here you will just continue checking. Even if king to g8, then queen can capture on e6, which will again be a draw. So after knight to d7 check, king to f7, it's important not to allow queen to e7. Now comes queen to d5. Again, Anish cannot trade queens here. We have rook to e8, we have rook 8 to d1, bringing the final attacker into the game, and king to g7. Finally, unpinning, we have g4. Anish wants to open up the f-file for the rook, but now pawn to f4. We have pawn to a5, as now Anish was very low on time, so I mean, you don't have anything to play, you're very low on time. It's just a very sad position. We have knight to f7, rook f to e1, attacking the knight here, and now rook c to d8. But now there's really not all that much to worry about. Anish pushes h4. We have f3, and it was in this position after Magnus pushed f3 that Anish Giri resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. By playing f3, Magnus invites his own queen into White's camp, and now queen to g3 will be deadly. Queen g3 check, and then you just checkmate the White king, and there's no good way to stop this. Even if king f1, still queen to g3. It's just a terrible, terrible position. Of course, after f3, Anish just resigned the game. So interestingly, Magnus won the first one, the second one, and the third one, so he takes down Anish 3-0, which is absolutely incredible. I could have shown you either of the three games, but this one was with the black pieces in the French defense. I thought you guys would enjoy this one the most. But now let's return to that position where I asked you, after Magnus played knight to b6, what would you play here with White? Well, I left the engine to crunch the numbers. I took Meadow for a walk, and when I returned, it had like a depth 46 or something, and the engine gives this as the correct way to play this with White. h4. Now, of course, black will play h5. You do not want to allow White to further advance that pawn. Now you play knight to g5, and now there's not all that much for Magnus to do here. It's very interesting what happens if he actually captures the pawn on a4, because it is a free pawn, but now your knight can't really move, and your queen can't really move very far away because the knight would be hanging. And you get even though the engine gives this as the best move for black, but now look at this: queen g3, g6, and now bishop to f3. And now only now White prepared everything sufficiently for the advancement of the pawn to f5, which Anish started with, but there were a few moves maybe to prepare this, because now look at this. Let's say bishop to d7, pawn to f5. And if g captures on f5, now look at this spectacular move, knight to h7. Yes, that is how you have to play, and that's what you absolutely must be able to do if you are to defeat the French defense. The French defense is so hard to play against, and if you can't play like this, you will not be able to beat it. So the idea is that, of course, if rook captures, just queen to g8 with check. So the only move for black to survive this is king to d8, queen g7, king to c7. Now the rooks are nicely defended. And now bishop to g5, and if, let's say, rook b to g8 attacks the queen, queen captures on f7, bishop captures on g5, h captures on g5, and now queen to b6 with a very nice trick, threatening knight captures on e5, but white doesn't care. You can play knight to f6. You can also play knight to e3, but knight to f6 is sufficient. Knight captures on e5. Now the knight cannot be captured. The queen is hanging. Queen to e7, and now knight captures on f3. Rook captures and queen to d6, offering a queen trade. Queen to f7, and here black is without a move. It's such spectacular stuff. The problem is your rook on g8 is hanging, and also the knight on a4 is hanging. That knight that captured that pawn, because the bishop cannot move, is hanging. But even though capturing the pawn was the best move, if you ask our good friend the engine, but it's hard to say. Even at the depth 45 or 46 that the engine achieved, the engine never really finds his way out of crunched positions like that, where you don't have all that many moves. If it's a tactical position, if it's an open position, the engine will just crush you. But here it's more of a strategic one where pawns are and none of the captures are really possible. Maybe the engine has no idea what it's talking about. Who knows? But okay, here the point is, if something like rook to f8, then queen captures on d7, you just trade queens, and then the knight on a4 will still be hanging. Captures, 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 and rook captures here, and you're just up a full piece, of course, completely winning. But yeah, just a hypothetical line, like a really hypothetical line, how to go about this position. So not f5, but first put all of your pieces on optimal squares and then push f5. You don't have to worry about the a4 pawn. So, if you face the French defense, if it's a weird position, consider doing something like this. Might work out for you. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely played by Magnus. Like I said, the beating Anish 3-0 is not an easy thing. And we are also going to check out one more game, and then we are going to discuss the standings, as, truly a spectacular tournament is being played here. Once again, really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, Harry Barton, Mariusz Klimek, Francis Air, and Carmen Polifronio for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.